there is inherent tension always between the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. The monetary policy, as you know, has a limited objective of exchange regulation and price control. Growth is not the primary objective of the economic policy. The economic expansion, they look at from primarily this a narrower but a more focused perspective to bring about a stability to the economy. The monetary policy in some countries, the monetary policy is more important than the fiscal policy. The US in particular, the driver of the US economy would be the monetary policy, whereas in developing countries, the fiscal policy is the driver of the change. It assumes automatically the role of a bigger brother. The fiscal policy primarily operates through the mechanism of taxation. How do we raise the resources? And importantly, how do you spend these resources in what sector, sector preferences, regional balance development, and other parameters which are part economic and part political. So the political perspective, the social perspective definitely comes in the fiscal policy. The key ingredients of the fiscal policy which we should look at is the fiscal deficit. The fiscal deficit, reading in the fiscal deficit and giving it a design, a long-term perspective, creates the fiscal stability for the economy. The second aspect is the quality of public expenditure, which emanates in this document called budget. We are more interested what this budget really is going to enable through Dr. Mahendra and how it is going to impact the various sectors and others, which will take the economy on a growth trajectory, because growth is directly related to the fiscal deficit. And here, apart from these, there are also some important references to public-private partnership, creating a PPP funding for transformation into urban India, which is an important value creator in the value chain. And they want to use this as a tool to bring about change in the urban landscape by using it as a leverage to bring in more. They are very interested to listen from before Mr. Mahendra would speak. I would request Dr. Jayprakash to give his comments and views about this budget, whether it is in the right direction, the shortfalls, what are its strengths, and then after that, I can begin the vote. Thank you. Thank you, Ramesh. Dr. Mahendra is a speaker, so I'm only here to sort of introduce the topic, and that too unexpectedly in the last. So please bear it. Thank you for First of all, there's a tendency in our country to assume that the budget has all the answers for the economic challenges of it. We assume that the finance minister of the country has mythical powers of God or intuition to respond everything by just saying the few things. I think we must temper our expectations. Probably this happened because there was a time when the finance minister decided to do the next millennial licensed by Mr. Tata. Therefore, every line which duty was increased or decreased, what happened, it was so difficult for the few interested players at the cost of the country. Blissfully, and I hope permanently, we have passed factors. Therefore, what matters is the broader picture and consistency. Having said that, let me only pose three issues. And I would like Dr. Mahendra to explain them very distinguished scholar. To go a little deeper, not only into the budgetary numbers, etc., the speed, but a little deeper into the economic challenges and the potential opportunities for the future. The first is, we all understand the global headwinds India is not facing. China had the good fortune get it things right at the appropriate time. They started liberalization in 1978. I still remember the four great modernizations that I saw at the time. The youngsters were not very, 50 years ago they started. 46 years, 7 years. And we were curious. In the way China has dramatically shown the ability to transform its economy into a large extent society, make it a great player in the modern world. It is very much that we were busy of it. But China also was lucky. The timing was perfect. At the time when the global tailwinds were there, international trade was universally promoted. When economies much of the world were actually doing pretty well, China seized that. Apart from the internal challenges, we are now facing in a country like Germany, which almost 6 decades after the Second World War became the premier economy in Europe. No matter what happened in the European Union, Germany was always there. Because Germany is. And of course, we all know about the company in the United States, insularity, and the way they are asking back more than 135 years ago. And you have to look at that. If the Americans made a choice, you want to have no say in that. They have to. And a nation which commands 27% of the global economy, and probably 50-60% of the global military might, probably 70% of global influence, you simply have to deal with that business. So how do we navigate this complexity? We are policymakers through budget or non-budgetary methods when we address it effectively. The second is, irrespective of what's happening in terms of global ethics, there are serious structural challenges in our economy. There are some economists and economists who argue that our growth rates are exactly what should happen given our structural intelligence. No matter what we aspire for, this is what we create. Now, without being fatalistic, there are challenges. Take 3 numbers. Any one number is unique in almost any big economy. All 3 numbers unprecedented. 85% of the workers of India are still in unorganized sector without a secure employment. Numbers may vary, and Dr. Mahendra will come up with a better number and give you a ballpark. That's very data. 65% of our population is still rural. There is no country which is more rural than India and only this. So there is some data suggests that not on satellite imaging, etc., the urbanization may be higher. But the fact is, we still are the lowest urbanized country in the largest population. Now, we all know that urbanization, modernization, prosperity, they go together. Notwithstanding our idyllic dreams of village life, I grew up in a village. Therefore, I can even learn from a village, you probably cannot. So, sentiment apart, we have to now create a model of organization that actually is acceptable for the people of the people. The third, 46% of Indian population still depends on agriculture as a primary source of livelihood. I mentioned 41% in my recent interactions at the Minister of Chairman. Dr. Panagaria said there's the project now becomes post-COVID. I was not familiar with that. Post-COVID, much of the rise in employment, female employment in particular, is in agriculture. No country comes anywhere near that. Take all 3 numbers. We have a monumental structural impact. Obviously, we have to look at education, healthcare, skills, regulation, rule of law, and small town urbanization. In situ urbanization is the forcing low-wage, low-skilled workers to go to big cities without any support system leading us to. So, practical intelligence are going to be an important factor. It's critical. The third, finally, let's assume the first factor. We are a democracy. A robust, noisy, highly competitive, I would say fiercely competitive, no holds barred, until death and I struggle in politics. And where the political incentives are aligned against it. There is no constituency, majority in India for economic. Let me face it.
Take Telangana, without going into partisan politics. In Hyderabad city and surrounding areas, in 24 assembly segments, in every segment, a party that promised the moon all kinds of short-term delivery has lost. Elsewhere, it tells you can see a clear divide in India. Those who benefited from economic growth versus those who did not feel their economy were not influenced economic. Now, in that climate, inevitably, short-term individual welfare measures at the cost of the long-term public good in the form of core functions of the state have become very frequent everywhere we see. These are the three fundamental challenges. We just elaborate one more sentence or two on the last point. Can we create a fiscal framework which will somehow insulate significant parts of economic management, fiscal management, from political database? It's not easy. It has to work. That's what many people talk about when they say institutions, not only politics, competition, elections, freedom, but also institutions. That's the reason why we have the central tax. That's the reason why we have many autonomous institutions and constitutional politics. You can argue, and I will also argue often that you cannot have another dictatorship in a democracy. But there are some institutions that we require to intervene because of the misaligned incentives. So I would be deeply grateful if Dr. Mahendra makes us think deeply about these, particularly the global challenges, what are the tactics and strategies. I think our diplomats and our policymakers are reasonably aware of that, and the folks that are asking about. But the structural challenges is in the tactics. In the political perverse incentives, how to deal with it, so that economic growth project is not there. I think we get insensitive. So the way I would look at a budget or policies is, are they addressing these effectively? Let me conclude with one quote on Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi is not very popular in the notwithstanding of the protestations. And there are many issues in which we should disagree with you. But there are many issues where the inclusion of untapped. In his talisman, remember, I don't remember the exact words, but the essence I'll try before. He said, think of the poorest man in the farthest corner. He did not say, give him help. Very often people say, people misinterpret. He said, if what you do is in a measure of control over his life, if it gives him dignity, if it gives him opportunity, then what we do is worthwhile. If it enslaves him further, makes him more dependent, then it's not worthwhile. I hope that's an admonishment that we will keep in mind, whether we admire it. These words represent you, Dr. Mahendra, friend, a scholar with integrity, commitment, and dedication. To present his views, he was close like the future of this language. Leading to in the world. Dr. Mahendra is currently serving as editor non-consulting agency, right? Which is like PW. He is also currently serving as distinguished professor with High School of Social Sciences, Hyderabad, and also chairman of the Institute for Development Studies, Andhra Pradesh. He is also independent director. He is in the board of Axis Bank, and he was the director and vice chancellor Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research, IGDIR, which is a very important research institution in the country, economic research institute in the country. And he has also, prior to that position, he was the chairman of the Commission for Agriculture, Cost and Prices, Ministry of Agriculture from 2008 to 2010. And he was vice chairman of the Board of Trustees of International Food Policy Research, IFPRI, Washington, D.C. He was also a member of the board of IFPRI for 7 years from 2013 to 2019. He was member and acting chairman of the National Statistical Commission, Government of India. He got the prestigious Malcolm Adisesaya Award in the year 2016. He was director, Center for Economic and Social Studies, Hyderabad, for 9 years, from 1999 to 2008. And he is also a member of Executive Committee of International Economic Society. And he has also has more than 150 research publications in his credit, both in international national research publications and journals in the areas of agriculture development, poverty and public policy, inequality, food security, nutrition, employment guarantee schemes, social security, farm and non-farm employment. He has written over 19 books as well in his study. And he has been a consultant and advisor to many international organizations, which include UNDP, World Bank, International Food Policy Research Institute, UNESCO, ILO, FAO, ASCI, UNICEF, PFID, and OECD. He has been a member of several government committees in India, including the Prime Minister's Task Force on Employment, chaired by Dr. Mahendra, Advisory Committee for the National Commission for the Enterprises in the Unorganized Sector, member of the Committee on Financial Inclusion, chaired by Dr. C. Rangarajan, and also member of the Expert Group on Poverty, again chaired by Dr. C. Rangarajan. He is chairman of the Committee on Terms of Trade on Agriculture, constituted by the Ministry of Agriculture, and he was member of several working groups of 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th 5-year plans as well. And he is also a member of several committees of NITI Aayog, and again he received awards, various awards for his contributions to teaching in economic-related sciences. And he has his PhD and MPhil from the Ministry of Economics, and also postdoctorate from Yale University. With this brief introduction, let me again, very welcome.
Thank you, to Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, Dr. Ramesh Kumar, and friends. Good evening. At the outset, I thank DC, Dr. Ramesh Kumar, ASCI, for inviting me to deliver this public lecture on Union Budget 2025-26. In fact, I used to visit ASCI when I was director of PES, Center for Economic and Social Studies. In fact, we had organized a few conferences jointly also that time. So coming to the lecture, before going to the budget proposals, first I will briefly discuss the present state of Indian economy, including the global challenges which Dr. Narayan mentioned. So at global level, you all know that there is a lot of political and economic uncertainty. This is continuing geopolitical risk and increasing protectionist environment. Most disruptive of all, as you mentioned, US President Donald Trump inaugural address, you can see massive deportation of illegal and even some of the legal migrants, and drastic tariff hikes, a trade and technology war with China, and an exit from the Paris Accord on climate change. So these are very disruptive kind of things. So cutting the supply of low-cost migrant workers and hiking import duties will sharply increase US production costs and also rekindle inflation. So slowing global GDP and trade will hit India also. In fact, recently we imposed tariffs on Canada and Mexico. So Trump is very unpredictable, and that reflects the global uncertainty. So on domestic front, the first advanced estimates show that India record moderated growth of 6.4 in 24-25 compared to 8.2% in the previous year. In fact, in the second quarter, the growth rate was 5.4%. So So one of the reasons is the moderation of government expenditure, and even gross fixed capital investment also is low growth, and private consumption growth also declined. Urban consumption is stagnant, although there are some, green shoot for rural consumption, slightly increased. Among the sectors, manufacturing sector showed 2% growth in the second quarter of this year. Employment generation, of course, is also concerned because of several reasons, including automation, technology, and all. So, in this context of global uncertainty, domestic slowdown, expectations were high in the budget. There was lots of expectations from the middle class, farmers, women, industry, and many others regarding the budget. But maybe noted, one has to remember the limitations of the union budget on the impact on growth and employment. Because first, the role of states is important. The states spend 60% of total government expenditure, 70% on education and health, 2/3 of capital expenditure, 79% of government employees employed by the state. So this is not there in the union budget. Second, many policy decisions are taken outside the union budget, even by the central government. So therefore, in evaluating the budget, one has to keep in mind, the impact on growth, employment, and all from the union budget. So I looked at implications of budget announcements in the following aspect: the fiscal deficit that I mentioned earlier, the public debt, expenditure, sector level, agriculture, industry, social sectors like health, education, climate change, and lastly on taxation measures. So in the end, also 5 minutes or so, I will discuss even our 2047 goals, because the budgets are continuation of the achieving the goals of 2047. So this is the first full budget of the third term, of the present government. Overall question is whether the budget is having a radical change or continuous. So it's a mix of, some changes and continuity. Some are long-term in nature. So the overall framework, as you might have seen in the newspapers, the 10 broad areas it covering poor, youth, and agriculture, rural manufacturing, employment, inclusive growth, in 10 broad areas. And she also mentioned the core engine, agriculture, MSME, investment, and exports as the core engine stuff. And some people are saying 3 C's, that is consumption, capex, and consolidation, the budget. Of course, in addition, we have taking care of the middle class, is another part of the budget. So it's difficult to pick something to criticize the FM, as she tick all the boxes, covered many of the things. Of course, we have to see the fine print in the next few days. So she's making, this fiscal deficit on scheduled glide path, maintain capital expenditure, making the long-suffering middle class happy, and also boosting consumption, and lastly, few reforms also be announced. Of course, focus on Bihar was expected because of the elections there. So I think 8 times we mentioned Bihar in the budget. Coming to the specifics of the budget, the revised estimate fiscal deficit this year is 4.8%. The budget was 4.9%. And then the projected for the next budget, 4.4% fiscal deficit. So finance minister that is sticking to the fiscal consolidation. Of course, the main current macroeconomic concern today is public debt. Public debt is the combined one, center plus state, is 85%. And center alone is 57% of GDP, the public debt. So fiscal consolidation was therefore high priority in the budget. So as expected, Finance Minister in her FY26 budget announced a new glide path. So basically, earlier fiscal deficit is the glide path. Now they said debt to GDP is the glide path. So they said in the next 6-year roadmap till 2030-31 aims to bring down the debt to GDP ratio from 57% to around 50%. So that's the glide path they are thinking. And the fiscal deficit should be in tune with this glide path. Earlier, fiscal deficit was the more indicator. A reduction in debt is important because otherwise, interest payments are 37% of revenue received and 44% of tax revenue. So you keep on paying interest payments and you don't have money for other things like infrastructure or health education and that. In fact, the original FRBM, the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, is that central government should limit to 3% of fiscal deficit. So that may be the ultimate one by the time we go to 2030-31. Because if you limit to 4.4 or so, you are the central and state government deficit will be about 7.5%, because state governments have about 3% deficit. So then you don't have investable surplus for the private corporate sector, because household financial savings are about 5.3% of GDP, and plus the foreign capital flow capital about 2%. So you have the investable surplus of 7.5. So if the fiscal deficit was 7.5, you don't have money for the private sector. So that's why decline in public debt is very important. And this is not good for growth and employment if you keep on increasing the debt. And regarding capital expenditure, in all her 5 budgets, the finance minister has pursued the goal of fiscal consolidation, transparency also, because off-budget things he has brought out in the budget, and thrust on capital expenditure. Because why capital expenditure? We economics, we talk about the multipliers. Because one rupee capital expenditure generates 2 to 3 rupees or so. So that's why we need capital expenditure for the employment and growth. In fact, the percentage of the capital expenditure to GDP increased from 1.7% before COVID 2019-20 to 3.4% now by the end of 24-25. But this year, the revised estimates show capital expenditure is lower by 93,000 crores compared to the budget estimate. One of the reasons is during the elections and all, they could not spend much on capital expenditure. Next year budget capex is about 11.21 trillion, which is about 3.1% of GDP. But now, there is a thinking in the government that it can't go on increasing capital when 3% or 2% of world. Now, as you mentioned, now it wants to promote more PPP model of capex, along with the government capital expenditure. Turning to revenue side, see the nominal growth of economy, they're expecting 10.1% in the budget. And gross tax revenue also they're expecting 10.8%. So we call it buoyancy. That is the growth to revenue is about 1.06, which we can achieve in the next budget also. And non-tax revenue like monetization and the divestment and also RBI transfers. They're expecting about 5.8 lakh crores in the next budget. which increased from 5.3. So, but the one problem is that the significant reduction of fiscal deficit is achieved by compressing total expenditure, both capital as well as revenue. So we don't know the implications of this. So the government budget is about 50 lakh crores, 50 trillion for the next fiscal, which is about 14.1% of GDP. So whereas last year budget, it was 14.9% and revised is 14.6. Now they projected 14.1. So fiscal deficit is achieved by compressing the expenditure. So both revenue as well as capital. Capital is less, but more revenue expenditure. Because the revenue expenditure of GDP also declined from about 11.4 to 11% for the next year. Okay. So there is also social sector expenditures, either stagnant or decline in constant pricing. So we don't know the compression of expenditure. What is the impact on growth and employment we have to see. Yeah. So in summary on this deficit and debt expenditure, budget has maintained the stance of robust fiscal consolidation along with maintaining capex. However, this has been combined with contraction of expenditure in sectors, in some sectors, and including the social sector. On subsidies, we have mainly two, apart from the other subsidies thing, but food and fertilizer subsidies are the main thing. The fertilizer subsidies about 1.68 lakh crores next budget. Food subsidies about 2 lakh crores. So total is about 3.7 lakh crores for the food and fertilizer subsidy, which is about 1% of GDP. So it's almost constant even earlier on. Now coming to the agriculture, recent documents by Niti Aayog and periodic labor force surveys on employment. So as the mentioning, the importance of agriculture is rising in the Indian economy. This is in contrast to the theory of development. Must have read some of you, Arthur Lewis kind of growth theory thing, and development experience of many countries, which showed that the share of agriculture in GDP and employment declines over time. Manufacturing services. A NABARD survey also shows that sharp rise in the share of agriculture households in the rural sector from 48% in 2016-17 to 57% in 2021-22. And the share of agriculture in total employment in India rose from 42% in 2018 to 46% in 2024. So this is peculiar development and needs more focus on agriculture. Regarding growth, agriculture sector has grown at annual growth rate of 4.2 in the last 5 years. Of course, only last year it was 1.7%. And this year they're expecting 2.8 or so. There seems to be some revival in rural demand and consumption. Tractor sales have increased significantly. However, food inflation was also high. I mean, the last December, it was 8% or so food inflation. Climate change in terms of heat waves and unseasonal rains also has impact on higher food inflation. Rural real wage growth, even the economic survey said, has been either low or negative in the last 1 decade. So in the context of rising share in agriculture and also stagnant employment wages, more push was expected in the budget. Of course, the finance minister has given some measures. They're in the right direction. The budget has, of course, the announcements on capital expenditure, MSME, health, education also help rural areas. Here. On agriculture specifically, she mentions Prime Minister Dhanya Krishi Yojana, that is about 100 aspirational districts covering 1.76 growth population. And also some for pulses, vegetables and fruits, and fisheries, mission on farm productivity, and also Kisan credit cards, some increase in the credit. So some of these measures to announce in the budget. Of course, it depends on how much is allocated and how efficiently they, because many are announcements, but after several times they forget these schemes. So if we see the total agriculture thing, the allocation, the 1.41 lakh crores in revised estimate, it increased to 1.71 lakh crore in the 26 budget estimate. So an increase of 21%. But if you compare budget to budget, it's about 13% increase. Some of the measures can improve productivity, diversification of incomes, but much more is needed for improvement in agriculture and rural areas. Basically, we have to narrative of agriculture has to change, diversified high value production, better farm incomes, marketing and trade reforms, and also nutrition sensitive, because that is becoming important, and climate resilient agriculture. So next few budgets, of course, move in this direction. Recently, central government has brought out a draft national policy framework on agriculture marketing for public comments. But this draft is more, collaborative approach, because earlier, without consulting states, they did. Now they want central states in reforming the farm markets. So the draft also talks about a council of state agriculture ministers, similar to GST council. So so we don't know how it is going to be impact on agriculture market reform. But of course, the more important thing is producer support to farmers. The recently OECD released a report. It says OECD countries support 13% of gross farm receipts to farmers. Whereas in India, it's a negative of 15%. That means Indian farmers are taxed because of the restrictions on exports and other policies. So export bans hurts farmers. So Indian farmers want freedom from restrictions on market and exports. In fact, an RBI study showed that wholesalers, retailers are pocketing 2/3 of what consumers pay to buy vegetables and fruits from the market. So the value chains and all will help. So a big push probably agriculture and rural areas needed because also the importance is high, both employment-wise and other, even GDP, about 17% or so. And this is also important to achieve our goals of 24/7. So coming to industry, two broad sets of measures help industry. One is economy-wide measure, like supply bottlenecks and create demand, removing the supply bottlenecks and create demand. Second one is industry-specific measures. So the first one is like infrastructure, roads, railways, and defense, all relate to economy-wide measures. Specific to manufacturing, of course, they announce labor-intensive sectors like footwear and leather sectors, toy sector, food processing, to some of the things they mentioned in the budget. For example, footwear and leather can facilitate employment for 2.2 million workers and exports of 1.1 lakh crore. Of course, there is also focus on skilling, but budget and also manufacturing mission will be established to look into the Make in India thing. But if you're coming to the issues, the Make in India program started in 2014, aimed at transforming India into global manufacturing. And by 22, they said GDP share will increase to 25%, but and generate 100 million jobs. But despite these kind of measures, still the GDP share is 17%, India manufacturing. And employment, how much? The 12% manufacturing share of employment. So the Make in India is not that successful. in that sense, in spite of some measures, because the manufacturing sector average growth has been around 5.6 or so, and the target was 12% or so. So, and job creation also has not happened. So this, and also India has PLI scheme, the production linked incentive scheme. It says about 12 sectors. The, of course, 4 sectors are more electronics and IT, hardware, automobiles, and auto components, pharmaceuticals. Some of them are more beneficial, but visible impact is on mobile phone manufacturing and toys exports. So a lot of things have to be done in manufacturing to improve the, because if you see the experience of many countries, as Dr. Jayapurkar mentioned, China experience. I mean, we can't do like China now because of the deglobalization and tariff war and other things. But still, India can, export as well as domestic manufacturing can be done, including defense. And MSMEs, this is the second engine of growth. MSMEs generate, 36% of our manufacturing and 46% of our exports. 3 measures were taken for MSMEs. One is investment and turnover limits were enhanced. Second, enhancement of credit availability with guarantee cover is proposed. Third is giving credit cards for micro enterprises. But you all know the problems of MSMEs. Many are also informal sector. They take informal credit also. And also technological upgradation, also important. Just giving money, not the only thing. On services, service exports are higher than the merchandise exports in India. So they said national framework will be formulated for global capability centers. But some of the state governments are saying, why should the central government come on this global capability center? It is, we can do ourselves. Again, they're going to interfere with that. Tourism is another sector, important sector in services. The budget says top 5 tourist destination sites in the country will be developed with states. Budget announces. It can create employment. But even events like Kumbh Mela, that is some stampede and all the other things are there. But they can create 1% of national GDP. The 45 days, between 400 to 400 million over 45 days, and assuming per capita spend of 5,000 rupees, and that becomes 2.35 billion rupees. And also jobs are created. So like Diwali festivals or weddings, all these things create consumption boost the GDP. Third engine is investment. He mentioned that they're investing in people, Anganwadi and Watson, on education, skilling, and etc. Investing in economy, PPP infrastructure. And one important thing is nuclear energy mission with partnership with private sector. It's a good one as part of promotion to renewable energy. In fact, Dr. Manmohan Singh in the 2009 or so, we had interaction with US on nuclear mission and energy mission. So that I think that's one of the important announcements. And third is investing in innovation, research, development, innovation fund is due for 20,000 crores. The fourth one is exports, because some measures are announced, export promotion mission, Bharat trade, etc. But one of the things is that India is also becoming protectionist for the last 2 years, although in this budget some they reduce. So that is India's import tariffs, even Trump was mentioning, are very high. That so that is one thing we have to reduce our tariffs, and so that competition will increase. No emerging market of India's size has grown at 7 or 8% for a decade without strong export growth. So we can't be like China, but still we can go from 17% to even 20% or 23% of GDP. Another thing is FDI. FDI, because recent years it's not coming that much. So improving FDI is important because they also bring technology to the effort from investment. And bilateral treaties, because WTO is not functioning. So even Trump and all, they don't believe in WTO. So the another thing announced in this thing is the reforms, the regulatory reforms, particularly ease of doing business. Of course, this has to be at state level also. So they said high-level committee will be appointed to review this non-financial sector regulation. Coming to the social sector, the share of social services in total expenditure has remained at only 5% in the union government. I mean, state government spend more also. Even on education, it's only 1.2%. And health also, it's about 1% or so. Because even the union government spending on education and health services are important because some of the concurrent list also is there. But very low priority is given to this in the budget, which is a concern. The health sector, apart from tackling pandemics, we need to move towards a universal health care. Many people say that we should spend 2 to 3% of GDP. But in both education and health, there is a dichotomy. Since independence, successive governments, including Jawaharlal Nehru, they did not concentrate on primary and secondary education. So they have given importance to IITs and other higher education. So you can see successive governments, they didn't focus on primary and school education because there are islands of excellence in India, like IITs and Institute of Science and all. But the school education and others, they churn vast majority of masses of children with poor learning achievement. So we also have the experience. One has to fix this dichotomy in health. Health also similar things are there. Primary health and the state study problems. So equity in quality education is the key for raising human development and reduction in inequalities. In fact, the former deputy prime minister, now the president of Singapore, cautioned about school education in, I think, few years back. He says, I quote, "Schools are the biggest crisis in India today and have been for a long time. Schools are the biggest gap between India and East Asia. And it's a crisis that cannot be justified by India." So he cautioned that unless we improve this, India cannot become a developed country. Also, even skilling, Korea, China, US, 60% are formal training, whereas India it's about 3% or so. The media is of themselves. So much gap between these. So these are the things which social sector has to move, and so unless the next budgets do that, unemployment. India is the world's fastest growing economy in GDP, but employment is a concern. The youth unemployment is probably the highest among the many countries in the world. Of course, also other problems in employment, low participation rates of women, although there is increase in recent years, because the 50% is the world average. Our women participation rates are 36 or something like that. Of course, impact of technology, AI on employment is also there. And also these working conditions of gig workers are also one concern. Coming to the last part on taxation, indirect taxes, there is a rationalized customs tariff. I said India's tariff rates are high. So there is some attempt to reduce in this budget. but not enough thing. Direct taxes, of course, you all know that we announced the no income tax payable up to income of 12 lakhs. So around 1 lakh crore in direct taxes will be foregone by the government. So some people say that, it will lead to more consumption and all. It is true that consumption may increase, but if you see the national account statistics, the private consumption is about 200 lakh crore. So 1 lakh crore, how can, increase the consumption? But the private consumption is about 200 lakh crore. Anyway, we'll come to know more details when the tax bill is introduced in the parliament after a week. On taxes, of course, some people say tax to GDP ratio has to be increased. Then, because our tax to GDP ratio is about 17 to 18%. So there is a debate. Some people like Surjit Balla says we have the highest tax paid country in the world. And some of them say that still we have to improve to 20% or more. Some people like Piketty, the Paris economist, he says we should introduce wealth and inheritance tax to reduce inequalities. But I don't think it may work or not work. We had earlier tax or something, but it not work. So lastly, I'll take five minutes. Yeah. On Viksit Bharat, the 2047 goal, the one is, of course, developed countries to become that, also inclusive and sustainable kind of thing. So Dr. Rangarajan estimated that around 7 to 8% real growth over the next 22 years is needed, and around 11 to 12% of nominal growth is needed to become developed country. But India has to take care of short-term challenges of inflation, higher fiscal deficit and debt problems, and monetary and fiscal policies mentioned also have to tackle the short-term challenges in the context of global uncertainties, and budgets also have to contribute to this. While there has been recovery from pandemic, there still remains concern for medium to long-term growth. One is the K-shaped recovery. K-shaped recovery is that we have bottom 40%, not much incomes increasing. Middle class also a little bit increased, but it's basically 10 to top 10% or 15%. They are increasing the current consumption for luxury goods and other things. So unless these people consumption increases, the growth may not increase, consumption may not increase, and growth may not increase. And we get challenge, of course, high sustainable growth, long time, creating sufficient number of quality of jobs, and also attain stable inflation and all. About demographic dividend, there are many also debates that, but I still feel India has, demographic dividend if you create employment, education, and skills. The next one is India has, as Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan mentioned, structural problems, long-term structural problems. One is the structural transformation, agriculture to industry and services. Because agriculture, 46% of employment, it is not sustainable because the productivity in agriculture compared to non-agriculture is very low. I mean, you can increase high value agriculture and all, but still. But reforms are needed in agriculture to improve the incomes, because you can't straight away throw 85% of small farmers and others to non-agriculture without employment prospects. Industry, there have been hardly any change, as I mentioned, but still lot of scope for expansion in manufacturing, including MSMEs. Services is a duality in the sense we have at high level IT employees and that kind of people, and at low level informal sector, shop outside, one person sits throughout the day, but how much money he or she gets, we don't know. So there is a inequality is high in service sector. And as you mentioned, informal workers, in fact, number is 93. 85 is the informal sector. Informal employees is that some of the formal sector also, there are informal workers, contract workers and all. So if we add that, it's about 90 to 93 informal workers. So there are really formal workers, about 7 to 8% in India. So the structural problem is one is that from agriculture to industry services, some of the people like Raghuram Rajan and all, they say we should concentrate on services and not manufacturing because of the deglobalization and all. But I feel both are complements because now we can't distinguish between manufacturing services. So we should have both, I think. The second structural problem is that you also mentioned the health education skills. I already discussed the problems there. But one sector that can transform India is education, which can become developed country. But this quality aspect one has to tackle there. Because the recent ASCI report says that there is a improvement in the learning achievements, but still fifth grade students cannot read second grade textbooks and they can't do the maths in the second grade textbooks. So those kind of quality problems. And climate change is now a serious problem. I mean, the budget didn't mention that much, maybe earlier budget mentioned, because the climate justice is one important one. The developed countries are historically responsible, but rich in developing countries also have to pay for their consumption, because rich in developing countries also have more cars, more luxury things and all. So they also have to they pay for the climate, the carbon emissions. Of course, digital transformation is another source of growth for India. Because impact of technology, AI also can improve growth, but employment, it is dicey whether how much employment you can do. Lastly, on technology, India's transformation over the next couple of decades will be embedded in three types of technological revolution. One is the energy transition. Second is artificial intelligence. Third is revolution in biotechnology. So three such simultaneous technological revolution rare in unprecedented history. So how India will make use of these technological revolutions is important, because the allocations, if you see renewable energy or biotechnology and all, it's very low. So with this focus, we can't compete with countries like China, United States, other advanced countries on these technological revolutions. And also one has to worry about the middle income trap, because we can be trapped somewhere when we become middle income. So one has to tackle that also. Lastly, on development versus welfare, which that's also hinted. Recent fiscal health report on states by Niti Aayog says some of the things are very high debt, and also welfare measures are very high. I mean, I don't want to mention the names of states, but there is no development in the states. Only transfers to. Of course, all the states now are competing on these welfare measures, because I always quote this Chinese proverb. Give a man or woman a fish and you feed him for a day, but provide him with a net and you feed him for a lifetime. So that proverb all to remember that there should be a balance between development and welfare. That is important because, for example, during the Vajpayee government, they started this global quadrilateral. So there are studies by World Bank and others. What is the impact of this quadrilateral on several districts of India? So, for example, even districts like Srikakulam or Surat, there is a 100% increase in business because of quadrilaterals, golden quadrilateral. So the welfare measures may be not measures, but these are the long-term measures important. That's why to infrastructure is very important. And also these budgets, we also could link to outcomes because we are spending a lot of things. And for instance, school education outcome include enhancing access, improving learning, retention, reducing dropout, apart from vocational education. Similarly, in healthcare, like improving patients' quality of life or rewarding practices that reduce hospital visits must guide resource allocation. It's difficult, I mean, the output, allocation in output, but efforts should be made. Similarly, road infrastructure should not merely aim at construction, but also measure success by economic impact on local community. Like the World Bank did a study on impact of roads. So to conclude, the recent budget, whether growth, it may have some impact because of consumption measures are there, and how much it will increase, difficult to say right now. And also some employment also may increase some of the things. But there are several things which are outside the budget, including state budgets, outside the announcements of the policy announcements. So they're also important. So to conclude, role of states in this journey is equally crucial if India wants to be a developed country and achieve inclusive development by 2047. So India has progressed on many fronts. The task is to build on the achievements so far and strengthen democracy, because the Prakash mentioned democracy. Democracy doesn't mean voting. Every 5 years we vote, and country is very good, in voting. But democracy also means you should provide, the directive principles of state policy like health, education, your requirements. Also, that's the beauty of the state. And move towards a society that is not only prosperous, but also equitable and pro-nature. Thank you very much.